Last week, on November 9th, A Light in the Mist came out, concluding the arc we have been with for the last 2.5 years, The Broken Code. As such, it's time that I give some thoughts on it, both this book and the arc as a whole. Spoilers for the latest book will be included, but I'll give warnings when we reach those sections. It's safe to say, though, regardless of anything else, this arc was a wild roller coaster of ups and downs for me. Let me begin where it all began, Lost Stars. And I'll say right now that it was a really promising start. We're introduced to our 3 protagonists, all of which have distinct personalities, goals, and obstacles in the way of those goals, and who look like they could not only have strong roles in the quickly forming plot, but also dynamics with each other and other members of their clans in the future. It presents a lot of intrigue and characters that are fun to watch while you wait for the intrigue to pay off. StarClan is shut off, Shadowpaw is receiving strange visions, Rootpaw loves Bristlefrost who doesn't love him back, and loves Stemleaf who doesn't love her back and loves Spotfur. And at the end, Bramblestar seemingly revives, but he isn't himself. The possibilities were oozing out of that story, and as a result I and many others got very excited. The second book, The Silent Thaw, delivered on that excitement. The imposter was cruel, decisive, and very intimidating. Shadowsight inadvertently becomes the imposter's mouthpiece, helping him gain influence over all 4 clans and drive out an assortment of beloved cats. Bristlefrost is manipulated to become the imposter's spy in ThunderClan, and Rootpaw is being contacted by the real Bramblestar through the ghost powers he inherited from Tree and the sisters. Tensions not only in ThunderClan but between the different clans starts to rise, and a rebel group forms in secret that includes Rootpaw and eventually Bristlefrost when she comes to understand all that has happened. And just as it was about to end, Shadowsight seemingly died. Veil of Shadows was pretty good too, all things considered. It had a couple of very strange left turns, like suddenly killing off Stemleaf, Berrynose, and Rosepetal among others, and Bristlefrost's confession to Rootspring. But the intriguing imposter drama, the clan tensions, and the workings of the rebel group as they plan to face down with the imposter are all really interesting pieces to read about. Shadowsight's semi-resurrection with Rootspring's help was somewhat anticlimactic, but I personally didn't ever believe that they would permanently kill off one of their point-of-view characters in the middle of the story, so it still met my expectations. Darkness Within, on the other hand, did not. This remains my least favorite book of the arc, because it's so aimless. Very little gets done, and we instead spend a lot of time building up a truly unrealistic level of bullying for Shadowsight to give him sympathy without building him a character and make him kind of help Ashfur out of left field at the end. A similar and even more unnecessary treatment is given to Squirrelflight as ThunderClan's acting leader, which has no purpose except to say that we need Bramblestar back. The rest of our time is spent on a journey with Rootspring, the now capable warrior and sister descendant, and Bristlefrost, who decides to drop all of her personality and character arc potential at the door, trading it in for bland romantic interest. The Place of No Stars wasn't much better. It had intrigue going for it, with the new Dark Forest lore and confrontations with Ashfur to enjoy, along with the now fan-favorite character Snowtuft. But it's a very circular plot, just going in and out of the Dark Forest without much progression of any kind. By the end, Squirrelflight was out of the Dark Forest, and Willowshine and Rootspring were in. But the goal of go into the Dark Forest to save cats who are stuck in there that drives the actions of this book is exactly the same as the drive that begins the next book. And so we come to A Light in the Mist. Spoiler warning, of course, and you can skip to this timestamp or past this upcoming spoiler chapter to avoid hearing about it. I honestly enjoyed this book, certainly more than the 2 that preceded it. It all took place over the course of a day or 2, so of course there were pacing issues, and plenty of moments to make you squint in confusion or groan in frustration when it came to the reforming, or lack thereof, that the Warrior Code eventually got, and the lore of StarClan and the Dark Forest that is growing ever more complicated and contradictory. But it was still a fun read. All of the main characters and even some side characters seemed to have personalities and goals again, and there were a few genuinely moving scenes, like Squirrelflight's declaration that she wants to fight Ashfur, and her subsequent message to him through Greystripe, along with Bristlefrost's permadeath and the aftermath of it with Rootspring having to explain to her desperate parents that she's very much gone. Honestly, I expected much worse. But most of those Dark Forest cats clearly don't need to be in the Dark Forest, right? StarClan's judgment is absurd. Many of both the strengths and faults of the arc come from its characters, starting with Bristlefrost. I've already talked at length about her before, so I'll keep this brief, but Bristlefrost was the character I was most invested in from the beginning of the arc, as she had the most interesting mix of strengths and weaknesses to me that could lead to a fairly obvious but really compelling character arc. But this was never done, and she was instead systematically stripped of every trait or possibility she had going for her until she was unrecognizable and only there to love Rootspring. As for In a Light of the Mist, My sweetheart was back! She was brave, compassionate, independent, and selfless, clearly acting not just for herself or Rootspring, but for every cat she came across. She and Stemleaf actually got along again, and she knowingly sacrifices herself to save everyone. I'd love to ignore the previous 2 books' interpretation of her, but she redeemed herself for me here. Speaking of the guy she loves, Rootspring probably got the best arc of the 3 protagonists, but it still wasn't perfect. He began as an insecure, irritable young apprentice with wild and erratic emotional outbursts, both positive and negative. However, as he matured and went through more formative and dangerous experiences, he mellowed out and became far more serious, although also more stock and simple as warriors' toms are concerned. The latter half of the arc didn't give him, or anyone, much to do, which prevented us from seeing exactly what this new maturity gave him. However, in A Light in the Mist, while he isn't the focus by any means, he does get to show off how he's grown as he tries to comfort her parents by summoning her spirit even when he knows it won't work, along with boldly and matter-of-factly declaring his commitment to her at the gathering to convince the clans to change the code. Although not by much, and in a way that is riddled with its own problems. Shadowsight, meanwhile, well, he fell flat too, but in a very different way. His was the arc given the most attention, but it was done quite sloppily and with little care for his own personal character as opposed to how cruel the world around him was. They didn't give him choices to make and obstacles to overcome so much as they gave him a barrage of unfair and unrealistic experiences and expected you to sympathize with him regardless of how you felt about his character. He also lacked positive relationships even more than the other protagonists, which didn't give him time to show off much of who he was beyond his suffering. Now, in the newest book, he somehow pulled an entire character out of his hat. He has goals, worries, and obstacles, and a personality to help him get past them. He also ends the book with a new and distinctive trait, being a medicine cat who can't, and in fact could never, communicate with StarClan. Yet is still accepted in for all he's done as a healer, and recently a warrior, and even a savior of sorts. There is one last character to discuss, the antagonist, of course. Bringing Ashfur back was a strong move for the editors to make, as he did have a lot of unfinished business with members of the cast, and his presence as a StarClan cat could give an interesting perspective while comparing him to the Dark Forest and rogue armies of the past. There's an awful lot of hand-waving when it comes to his abilities and exactly how he is able to, for example, close the StarClan border so that no one could get through or control any ghost cat he comes across. But in concept he works fine, and there is no doubt that he has a conniving and threatening presence throughout his stories, along with the desperation and pettiness emblematic of his previous behavior towards Squirrelflight. Every tragedy that comes up in this arc is effectively a consequence of his arrogance and vindictiveness, which I honestly find to be great for a villain. For the arc as a whole, there are a few general notes, themes, and issues to cover, with the first being StarClan. The clans have always greatly revered their ancestors and consider them to be far more benevolent, powerful, and necessary than we've come to understand them to be. But in this arc, with StarClan missing entirely, the clans seem to break apart and every cat grows very hostile, something the arc attributes to StarClan being missing. Personally, the idea that their religion disappearing would suddenly negate morality and compassion is not an idea I've ever been able to get behind, and this arc isn't the first to have brought it up. On the other side of their afterlife, the Dark Forest has new lore, inventing an emotion-based power system that allows strongly motivated cats to heavily alter all worlds and members of the dead, and actively corrupts any cat who is in the Dark Forest for too long. It's not something that was ever true before in previous appearances of the afterlife, but the Dark Forest hasn't ever stayed consistent for more than an arc at a time, so if it's used properly, I don't mind it much. Like all of the recent arcs, the Broken Code also suffered from a huge dip in quality and direction after the 3rd book, as well as not often showing off or caring about side characters like Stemleaf and Berrynose, Myrtlepaw and Sorrelstripe, or even family like Ivypool, Fernsong, and Thriftier. Characters only appear insofar as they are directly needed for the story, and not for the sake of developing any relationships between each other or the main characters. Now it's time to leave the Broken Code behind, and set our sights on what comes next. A Starless Clan, with the first book River set to release this coming April. We don't know much about any of the cats who will soon be our new protagonists, so I'm willing to give them a chance and see what is done with these relative blank slates. Flamepaw, one of the trillion Firestar descendants who is going to struggle upholding the legacy of a cat none of his peers or even his parents have ever met. Sunbeam, a cat in ShadowClan who will struggle at something in ShadowClan. and Frostpaw, who will become a medicine cat apprentice in RiverClan, something that automatically makes me excited. Finally seeing what goes on over there across the lake will almost certainly be interesting, regardless of anything else. But if Misty Star and Reed Whisker could both die, leaving Frostpaw to choose the next leader a la Code of the Clans, I would be even happier. It's safe to say that wherever the series goes next, I will be willing to come along for the ride. Even the lacking arcs and material from the series have given us wonderful new elements and ideas to enjoy and bounce off of, and I am confident that a Starless Clan will continue that trend. Good luck, Warriors. I'm pulling for you. Thank you for watching, and always remember to challenge the world as it is, and work towards the changes you'd like to see.